Right, great. You're all very welcome. Today is the 17th of January 2022. We have our guest speaker, Paul O'Brien he's the chairman of the Environment and Rural Affairs in the IFA. I'd like to say a few words, just like I know Paul personally. His wife works with us here in the shop, and Paul is a sheep farmer and tillage farmer in Graignamanagh, County Kilkenny. And I just suppose my first question, Paul, would be how did you get involved in the IFA? And you might just explain a little bit about the IFA as an association.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Stephen, for the invitation to come to speak to the Rotary Club today. And look, it was the progression to be involved in the IFA. I suppose it didn't come naturally. It was an evolution, maybe, and that evolution probably started with Mark the Farmer as the IFA evolved as well over the years. But I suppose just a little bit about my involvement with the IFA. I would have started to become more involved in about 2000, 2001. I would have been branch secretary here in the Graignamanagh branch. I would then took over as chairman, would have gone to county executive structure, the county executive, and got more involved at a county level. And I suppose just to give you a bit of a background on how the IFA works, we represent over 73,000 members throughout the country, over 930 branches. There's 35 branches here in Kilkenny alone. We have farming in Kilkenny it's a very busy place, with over 3,700 individual farmers farming over 166,000 hectares of land. So farming in Kilkenny is a very, very busy place. But I suppose how I got involved, I would have been the former county secretary, I'd have been a former county vice chairman, but I was also elected as the Kilkenny representative on the National Environmental Committee. I suppose just to give some of your colleagues a bit of background on that, there were 29 individual county executives throughout the country. They all have a chairman, a secretary, vice chairman, the whole structure. But what we also do is we elect members to represent us at the national level on those committees. So everything from dairying, livestock, tillage, all of the different farm businesses, and also farm families. So there's a whole array of different commodities and committees that the IFA are involved in. And I suppose for my sins, I would have always had an interest in environmental issues, but also a part of my job is also infrastructural issues as well. The rural affairs aspect of my job is very much to liaise with, I suppose, government bodies, whether that's the Department of Transport, TII, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, and all of these bodies to negotiate on behalf of farmers on codes of practice or working arrangements. And so really, I suppose, Stephen, to say it's evolved my time in IFA. Was voted in as national chairman 2 years ago. So of all of the different county executives throughout the country, 29 of them, and the chairman, they elect a national chairman to represent them. And I was elected 2 years ago to become the national chair. So maybe that's just a bit of the background of how I got into this position in the first place.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's great. So how do you, how do the IFA cope with the different sectors within the association? Sorry.
Yeah, no problem, Stephen. And the way this works is that we have a national council. The national council is made up of a chairman from each of the 29 executives, representing mainly county lines, but in obviously places like Cork, we have three chairmen representing Cork. We have a couple of other counties, Kerry and Galway, because they're big counties, a lot of farming activity goes on, lots of members, they have second representatives. So we have a national council. I sit on the national council as well as regional chairs, as well as a deputy president and a president. And that's the governing body of the whole IFA. So to better explain that, if there's an issue in a local branch in Kilkenny, that's brought to our county chairman. It's discussed once every month. We have our county executive meetings. Tonight we're having our AGM. So these are discussed, and if we think that there's merit to bring this further up the line, it comes to our National Council. It's debated at National Council. So we are very much a bottom members upward organisation. And so we deal in policies, whether they're a local policy, whether they're a national policy, and more European policy.
Yeah, very good. I suppose your role as the Environment and Rural Affairs Chairman, is there paid employees within that role? Or, yeah, basically, would there be paid employees within the role of that sector?
Well, how the IFA works is I'm an elected representative of the farmers. So first of all, I was elected for the position of the county representative in Kilkenny by the 35 branches. So I was elected, but then, as I said before, I became elected by the 29 representatives from around the country. So I'm a voluntary officer. And the way the IFA works is I'm paid some of my out-of-pocket expenses, my driving, a certain amount of payments, obviously, when if I'm away from the farm, that I can have somebody to fill in for me on the farm. So that's it. So there's a voluntary sector, which I am, but we also have a staff. Our memberships and the memberships that farmers pay goes to pay for our staff and the knowledge there. So within my committee, I have 3 people who work as advisors for me. Geraldine O'Sullivan is a policy director when it comes to most of the environmental issues. I have Kevin Kinsler, who helps me with my infrastructural work. We also have Edel has only joined us there in the last year, and Edel McAvoy, she helps us on our program called Smart Farming, which is an amalgamation between the IFA and the EPA on how to, reduce emissions at farm level, and also to try to, obviously, for farmers to reduce their output, so therefore to make their own individual farm businesses not only more sustainable, but also financially benefits for, obviously, if you're not using nutrients, or if you're reducing your costs at source, then it has a savings benefit and then attributed back to the business.
Okay, very good. So I suppose next question would be, do you work with the Green Party? Do the IFA work alongside the Green Party? Or how do the farming community feel the IFA and the Green Party liaise with each other, or is it falling on deaf ears with the Green Party, or what's the communication between both?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there, Stephen. I think the first thing is that we've dealt with many individual parties since 1955 when we were formed, across many different coalitions, and we have to deal with who we have to deal with at this particular moment in time. There's no doubt that even on my committee, 70% of the programme for government falls under the remit of my committee in some shape or form, whether that's obviously the environmental issues and the sectorial targets that have been handed down by the Climate Advisory Council, whether that's dealing with our nitrates derogations, and whether that's dealing with things such as the river-based management plan. So there's lots of work coming down there that most certainly now have an environmental focus, and they become front and centre for government policy and also European policy. All you have to do is look at Ursula von der Leyen, our president of the Commission, who handed down the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork and all of these buzzwords, which effectively suggest that, yes, we have to have a reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by 55%. Our target in Ireland is 51% of a reduction by 2030, and this has to be done in a sustainable manner. So we are dealing with 3 parties at the moment. Obviously, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which would have a more traditional, I suppose, history of over 100 years now of representing people in the country, but the Green Party is now there, and they are obviously carrying a considerable amount of influence, but we are dealing with them. And you know, I must say my dealings with Malcolm Noonan go back to sitting on a Kilkenny Council SPC back a number of years. And you know, Malcolm's a very easy guy to get along with. He understands our concerns. He's been out on many farms with us throughout his tenure as a junior minister. And so Malcolm is a good guy to work with. He understands where we're coming from. But there's no doubt we are looking at a different world. Emissions is a problem for all of the societies, but for agriculture, we have 37% of the total emissions in the country attributed to our industry. And as a result of that, there are going to have to be changes. And Malcolm wouldn't be doing his job on behalf of his constituents if he didn't flag us as being an issue. And I wouldn't be doing my job as representing the farmers of Ireland if I didn't go back to Malcolm and say, well, Malcolm, we do believe that, yes, there's going to have to be changes to our farming systems, but you need to work with us. When it comes to Eamon Ryan, the minister is also the Minister for Transport. So a lot of his remit falls under my remit as well. So there would be a considerable amount of interaction between myself and my committee with the Department of Transport as well.
Very good. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask, Paul? You're on mute there, Joe. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Paul. Nice to see you again. I've worked with Paul. Well, he's helped me a lot, and I just thank him very much for his support as a member of the IFA. I have a question really, because it's all about the environment. And do you see the target set for 2050 as being achievable in terms of farming in Ireland? And if not, what is the IFA lobbying or looking to get changed in the proposal for 2050?
Okay. Well, Joe, it's great to see you again virtually. But look, I think there's a number of things that, you know, we need to make very clear. There are sectorial targets that have been attributed to agriculture. We have to have between 22 and a 30% reduction in our emissions by the time we get to 2030. Now, that is going to be challenging, very, very challenging. I would suggest other industries, other technologies have been proven, whether that's the transport sector. You have the ability to travel from Kilkenny to Dublin today in a battery vehicle or a hybrid. You have the ability to do that. Also, if you're heating your house, you have the ability to use an air pump as opposed to burning coal or kerosene. So yes, other industries will be able to transition, I would suggest, slightly quicker than agriculture. But we have been set a target, and our targets are going to be challenging. We are going to have to depend upon lots of research and innovation taking place over the next number of years, whether that's with our own chuggers doing work for us on finding ways that we can improve carbon sequestration, drawing down carbon from the atmosphere and sinking it into the soils, or novel feed ingredients that reduce methane that's sourced in animal stomachs, in cattle and sheep and stomachs. So yes, it's going to be a challenge. How can we do it? It really means redesigning a thing called the MAC curve, the marginal abatement cost curve for emissions. So yes, massive challenging. Can it be done? It's a challenge. Is this the challenge of our lifetime? In agriculture, probably is. So Joe, I'm not sure whether that answers all of your questions, but we have a body of work to do. If we decide to do nothing, we will most certainly lose in a court of public opinion. We have to do the best that we can individually do as individual farmers, but collectively as an industry.
Roisin?
Hi, Paul, how are you doing? My question then would be, following on from that, is what percentage of the farming population are with you on that? As you know, as the overall body, you obviously have responded to the target set, but the individual farming population, what percentage do you think support the targets and not support what you're doing, and who do you have to win over?
Good questions. I think, Roisin, we have to win over lots of people, and there's no doubt that nobody sees themselves as being a polluter. Everybody blames it on the person next door. So everybody in society has a role to do to reduce their own emissions, whether that's an individual household, whether that's a business, or whether that's a farm. We all can do more. Is it going to be challenging to convince the naysayers or the I suppose the people who are slow to adapt? It's going to be, but there's no doubt about that. We have a situation where, unfortunately, the average age of an Irish farmer is approaching 60 years of age. That's the average. But there is a new, younger generation coming through who are very well educated. You know, farming now is nearly like a third level kind of degree level course that you do when you become farmers. So you are dealing with a cohort of new, a new enthusiasm coming into the industry that has a knowledge and an understanding that, yes, they can do more. They have a role to play, not only on emissions, but things like water quality as well. A big part of my job is, being a stakeholder on Forum Ishka, the Water Forum, other water body stakeholders where, farmers are responsible people. They have to become even more responsible. It is going to be an education and a learning curve. But ultimately, if there's farmers out there who believe that, they can take the ostrich mentality where they can decide, this isn't for me, this whole thing can bypass me, they're not going to be, they're going to be lost in the rush. We will always have to be, to prove our credentials, our green credentials. They don't come just by a piece of paper. You have to prove them, whether that's board beer auditing, whether that's, going the extra mile, because the consumer at the end of the day is looking for change, quite rightly. So if the consumer is looking for change, the farmers who are slow to adapt will be probably paid less for their product going forward. And ultimately, price will always drive innovation. It will always drive change. So hopefully that will answer your question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks very much, Paul.
Stephen?
Yes, Dermot, go ahead.
Yeah, following on from the last two questions, and thank you for joining us today, Paul, and your openness in answering them. There's a big issue, obviously, particularly with regard to cattle, be it beef or dairy, and the methane issue and the environment. And it's a very delicate issue. I'm just curious in listening to you there, the role of the IFA, to what extent is your strategy to be a leader on this issue, or to be a follower and you respond as best you can, to use your own phrase, the court of public opinion? Or is the IFA convinced that this is the way we have to go and it's going to lead it and lead its farmers along that journey?
Well, I think that's a very pertinent question, in the sense that, we can't pretend nothing is happening here, but we also have to, respect the views of our members, who would suggest that when you hear terms that the levels of stock should be reduced, and all of these kind of conversations that are happening in the background, they're probably not helpful either. Farmers would see themselves as being very much solution providers. We farm, 80% of the land in the country in some shape or form, whether that's, pasture lands or tillage lands or hedgerows or forestries. They're under farmer control, and farmers would suggest also that they're not really given the credits for our carbon sequestration potential. And that's going to be a struggle, because really the research is only really starting on that kind of knowledge and understanding, how it works, how much carbon we can, suck into the soil and retain there. Farming practices are changing. We're using more clovers than before, which trap down carbon at a lower rates than normal grassland swards. So all of this technology is moving. And these are the practices that we are going to have to adapt to. But unfortunately, this will always come down to good emissions versus bad emissions. You know, methane from agriculture, it is a problem. 66% of our total emissions profile comes from methane. But the problem there is that, you know, methane is a short-lived carbon cycle. It lives in the atmosphere for 10 to 12 years and is broken down very quickly. It's sequestered back down into the soil by a process called, you know, obviously photosynthesis, but the breakdown is hydrocortisation. And as opposed to, and really the way that this works is that farmers would suggest that this is a part of a closed loop carbon cycle. If the population of our bovines is not increasing, and it hasn't, we've been under 7 million animals really since 1990. So if our animals are being farmed in a better way, which they are, because our milk production has increased massively in the last 30 odd years, we are the most efficient milk producers in the EU. We're fifth at producing beef in the EU. So we have got this down to a reasonably decent model, but that model will always need to be improved. But I think it needs to be a part of a bigger debate. You have emissions coming from food production against emissions coming from fossil fuel burn. The transition for fossil fuel burn in industries, you know, the technology is already there, as I've said. We are going down a road where 80% of our energy production will be in the form of some form of renewables going forward. We had the ability, as I've said before, to take a battery vehicle to Dublin, or, you know, they're getting better. And there's going to be 1 million electric vehicles are proposed on the road by 2030. So when you take all of these conversations into place, yes, you know, we are on the kind of, I suppose, we do need to understand that we have to do our bits, reduce emissions, and we have the ability to do that. We are going to be dependent on the geographies, as I've said. Research bodies in universities as well are starting to do more work. It's also private industry doing considerably more work, research and innovation into reducing emissions. So all of those things can be done. And just simple things, the amount of fertilizer that we spread, using different types of fertilizers have a less of an emissions profile. As you see, the slurry spreaders going out now, and they're allowed to go back out now as from the middle of last week. You see these big apparatus on the back of these slurry spreaders. They're designed to reduce emissions. More and more slurries are being spread with these type of apparatus, with low emission slurry spreading systems. They will all help. We also have to get more efficient on the animals that we have on our farm. Keeping animals there longer that are producing emissions, we have to fine tune it. We have to fine tune it. By just reducing our slaughter weight of our animals going to the factory, our bovines, our cattle, we have the ability to reduce emissions by about 700,000 tonnes. So there can be challenges. If we reduce those by an extra 2.5 months, if we finish them quicker, become more efficient. So therefore, practices can be done at farm level to reduce our emissions. But it was also very, very important that, look, we have to do more. We acknowledge that. But it's to do practices that also have to come with some form of support. If we're expected to take land out of agricultural production to re-wet if it's a PTA type soil, or to put it into forestry, which is a big aspiration document from the Department of Ag and our own climate change advisory councils. So if we're to do all of that, then that does come at a cost. If you're asking farmers to take land out of agricultural production, which is an asset to them, to change practices, then there's going to be a cost attributed to that as well.
So it's not about reducing herd sizes. That's the type of language that is anti-farmer. It's about more efficient processes and different feed inputs and et cetera, et cetera. And that's the secret, I take it. Yep.
Well, I think there's a couple of things there. The first one is that, you know, we hear about a national herd. The herd is, you know, 7 million animals divided over 100,000 farms. So on average, there's 70 cattle on each farm. You take that into, you know, you take into account other countries such as Brazil, where Brazil are forecast to go up to 225 to 230 million cattle. Now, they're cutting down the rainforest in order to produce more animals because, fortunately or unfortunately, there's a demand. The world's population is forecast to go up to 10 billion people by 2030. So we have to feed a growing world population while also reducing our emissions. So that's where the challenge will be. Do we produce that in a country like Ireland, where it's natural resources, it's grassland, we have a longer growing season than any other country in Europe, we have a pasture-based system where emissions are reduced, as opposed to feedlots around the world where, you know, feedlots coming in where feed has to be brought into those places. But 80% of the cattle in the world are fed in feedlots, as opposed to finish on a grass-based system. So massive amounts of work to be done. We have a term called carbon leakage. Should our farmers reduce production so other countries who have a less sustainable agricultural model to get an economic advantage over us? So the whole term carbon leakage is an important term. And I think people really have to understand that, yes, this is going to be a stage in the future where we have to become more efficient with the animals that we have on our farm, earlier slaughter weights, reduced fertilizer usage, reduced chemical pesticide usage, but that can all be done.
Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, just building on what Dermot said there. As you know, I work in the food business, and one of the things we're beginning to notice now are schemes where the carbon impact or the carbon footprint of a product is declared on the pack, so the consumer can make an informed choice to buy a product that has a lower carbon footprint than another. And there's a plethora of those out now, and I imagine they're going to be rationalized to say 2 or 3. But is the IFA doing any work with, for example, the milk producers and the meat factories on giving Irish farmers the advantage that they have in that area, more prominence on the pack?
I think there's a couple of things there. Yes, like we would feed into Board Beer. Board Beer would be the semi-state body that looks after the selling of our food products globally. We are producing more throughput of products. Our exports of 13.5 billion. They're forecast to go up to well over 20 billion in the next number of years. But yes, I suppose, Joe, more, you know, we are involved. IFA, and I'm the program kind of manager of our smart farming program, and so there's different things like this as well. Also things such as you know, Chogus's signpost farms. 100 farms are going to be kind of monitored over the next number of years. First of all, is to give a baseline figure for their carbon sequestration potential. So effectively monitored farms, everything of their business will be monitored over the next number of years. They'll be given baseline figures, and then they'll be monitored over the next number of years. And that will give us a very clear direction of, you know, what is happening at farm level. When it comes to the signpost farms, there'll be core farms where farmers in the area or in the region will be able to go and visit to learn the practices that are happening on these farms as well. So, yeah, I think that the whole point is that Ireland will always have to look for a marketing advantage in our exports. All the world is looking for foods to be grown in a sustainable way. If we lose our marketing advantage, it will be taken up by another country that has a better environmental credential than us. So if we're looking for premium market access, then at that stage, we have to prove once and for all that we have the ability to produce a product with the least amount of environmental, I suppose, footprint going forward.
Paul, would you like to, I just see you have a smart farming initiative. Do you want to just give us a slight introduction into what that's about?
Okay, well, Stephen, back in 2013, 2014, when one of the policy director or the policy advisor who was employed with the IFA at the time, he's now gone on to work for Glanbia, a good guy called Thomas Ryan. But when Thomas was attending his EPA meetings over the years about obviously emissions, and there was no link between agriculture and the EPA when it comes to emissions reductions. So at the time it was decided we'll have a project going forward. So smart farming was developed, and smart farming is where a farmer approaches the IFA, maybe at the plough match or the Tullamore show, or speaks to somebody like me or one of the representatives in one of the counties, and they take the challenge. And the challenge is that an agronomist will come to their farm. An agronomist will study all of their farm businesses. They'll measure how much water they use, how much electricity they use, how much feed, fertilizers. They'll do soil samples, and they'll design a plan for them. And the plan is to do two things. Number one is to show how that they can reduce their emissions at source, to become more efficient in their operation at farm level. And the second one is a cost-saving exercise. Obviously, if you do soil samples, you know how fertile your land is. If you then design a fertilizer plan around how much fertilizer you should be spreading, it means that you might not be spreading wasting your products, because the problem with fertilizer is well, there's two things. It's very expensive this year because of enormous gas prices. But the second one is that if you are spreading the product where it's not needed, it will be wasted. That's what happens when it goes into the atmosphere. That's what happens if it's not utilized. It will go into a water course in some shape or form. So this is a win-win. It's a win-win for obviously water quality, for a reduction in our emissions, but it's also a reduction for farmer. The farmer then can have a plan in his hands that says, okay, if I utilize this plan going forward, then I will have a reduction in, my expenses will go down. So it is a financial win, but it's also a win for the environment. So every year we do about 50 to 60 of these farms. The one thing we ask our farmers then to do is to discuss their figures with a discussion group, to bring it to an IFA meeting or a group of farmers, to let them know, what they've done, how they've made changes, and how those changes have brought back a core or a mutual benefit for the environment, and also a cost-saving benefit for the farmer as well. So it's a project. Unfortunately, COVID has had a bit of a challenge on it. We've had to reduce the last 2 years. We're only doing about 30 to 40 farmers. We traditionally have a big open day. Our last decent open day was actually in Kilkenny. It was in Danesforth on a farm there owned by the Sheehan family. And, it's a good day. The minister comes and gives it its launch every year. So it's a very positive. It's received awards. So, I would be a big advocate that this is, the way forward. Farmers learning, education, understanding, but mutual benefits for the pocket and for the environment.
Very good.
Paul, sorry if I can just come in there just a little bit. First, I'd like to compliment you on your fantastic presentation there. It's so interesting. I could listen to it forever. I'm just a small thing. Is there much education available to the farmers in relation to this? The way I see it, I do quite a lot of work in the agri sector. And I see the up and coming younger farmers, they're not going to be the problem, because they're the ones developing all the dairy herds at the moment and building all their new dairy enterprises. And of course, they have no choice now but to be compliant with green energy and the environment and everything that's stipulated. The ones I see problematic are the older farmers, the farmers of my age and beyond, dare I say it. But is there or are there any plans to have any incentives there for those farmers to move on? I see this now as the clock is ticking very, very fast. And I'm involved with valuations on a European level on a board in Brussels, and we often touch on the environment from an agri point of view. And to be quite honest with you, things are moving much faster in Europe generally than they are here, especially the older farmers. They're the ones really that I kind of see where the problems are going to be. And we can't wait until they just disappear naturally off the planet. Where do you see that yourself?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there, and yeah, you know, you are right. There's a new cohort farmer coming into the system that's very well educated, and they've gone through an education process. Like my farming education would have started back in '86. I would have done the green cert as it was at the time, but yeah, I do feel that's where we can do. You know, choggers have a role to play. I have a role to play when I'm going out to my county executives and talking to groups of farmers. You know, all I can do is provide kind of knowledge well, you know, show them the avenues of where they can get information. But we have considerable more knowledge available to us than ever before. You know, the internet is a massive source. You know, choggers do a massive amount of work. They have their signpost series of videos every Friday morning between 9:30 and 10:30. There's environmentally focused education tool available for farmers just to log on to. The Farmer's Journal as well. So there is, but I suppose the question you're really asking is there any mandatory kind of educational learning process that these farmers have to do? The real answer is probably no, but the other answer would be is that in order to comply with legislation and rules and regulations that are handed down, you know, farmers have to have an ongoing relationship with an agricultural advisor, whether that's a private consultant or whether it's a chogger's advisor, and that's an opportunity a couple of times a year for the advisor to tell the farmer, you know, what they should be doing, what their recommendations are, and also what their regulations are as well. Next year, we will have to do a thing called a Fertilizer Register, which means that, you know, if I go to my local Glanbia or my local Brett's or, you know, Dalton's or Conley's or one of these companies, and I purchase fertilizer, that's going to be attributed to my herds, to my farm. So there's more and more rules and regulations coming down the line. And I think farmers understand that.
Sorry, no, I suppose where I'm coming from really on that is I know that there's an awful lot of information available on the internet, but those farmers that I refer to are not the ones that will connect with that on a Friday morning, as you correctly state. Like say in the housing industry, for example, there's incentives available through SEAI and all of those to future-proof homes. And I'm just wondering on the older circuit side of agri, I mean, essentially we want the farmers to future-proof their farms. Yeah. And if something could happen along that line, I think it might be helpful to moving on with things. Now, of course, I mean, you know, that age group too are probably dinosaurs when it comes to technology, you know?
And I think there's a couple of problems there. And look, you're most certainly not the first person to come up with this, that there is a problem going forward. But we do have to be very clear that the regulations are there. You know, we have to comply with good farming practice legislation. We have to deal with the nitrate regulations. And so farmers would have an understanding of, you know, what they can and what they can't do. But I suppose to bring them to the next journey on how they can do more to reduce emissions at source. I do believe that things like the board beer quality assurance schemes, the origin greens, all of those are kind of giving them knowledge to a certain extent. Whether we're going to be able to encourage them to go and sit back into a college or a classroom, I don't believe that's going to be the case. But there is a massive amount of information out there for them. How they wish to engage with that is another question. Whether some of these people have smartphones is another question, or internet coverage is as well one of these problems. But look, it's a body of work that we do. Most of the conversations I have at the end of county exec meetings are with some of the older generations of farmers who wish to kind of know some of the avenues that they can go down to get more information. But yes, we do have a problem when it comes to dealing with, I suppose, a certain cohort of farmers, you know, who probably believe that, you know, unfortunately, they're not the ones causing the problem. The problem is their next door neighbour farmer. And there is a bit of a mentality of that I do think is changing slowly, because I do believe that at the end of the day, all farmers are aware of public opinion. If there is radios conversations happening, or news programs, or, you know, they're looking at the Farmers Journal, they fully understand that the public opinion is asking them to farm in a more sustainable way, taking care of environmental, air quality, water quality, and also biodiversity. So they are going to have to do more. Whether they wish to engage is a question that is probably going to be, I can only sit here in 10 years' time to say yes, they did or they didn't. But I do understand, yes, you know, everybody's going to have to do more. How we convince an older cohort of farmers to go out there again and relearn. Nobody really wants to suppose sort of like an old dog learning new tricks springs to mind. But farmers are business people as well. If at the end of the day, their produce is less valued as a result of them not wishing to participate in any knowledge events, such as we have a thing called KT as well, knowledge transfer. Plenty of farmers would be involved in that knowledge transfer. A group of farmers meeting every so often, 6 to 8 times a year, and, you know, information being given out by an advisor of some shape or form, or somebody that comes in and speaks to the farmer and lets them know exactly, you know, what's going on and what they should be doing. So there is a bit of that as well. But everything is resources. The department needs to be putting resources into place in order for this to happen. You know, farmers will always participate. But what they also need to be done is that, you know, money has to be put into these advisors as well to come out and to talk to these farmers as well.
That's great. Thanks. Sorry, I think you're on mute there, Ella. That's great. Thank you very much, Paul. If nobody else has any more questions, I think we'll end the meeting. Just one or two other things I wanted to say just regarding Rotary. We do have a district council meeting on the 29th of January. And then I know the Interact Club are doing a Smarter Than a 6-year-old competition on Friday. So I think Elaine is looking for prizes in regards to that. Paul, thank you so much. I think you certainly know your field, I have to say, pardon the pun, but that was fantastic talk, and I really appreciate you giving us the time today. If you don't mind, we'll definitely share the recording with the Interact Club and anyone else who would like to view it. But yeah, thank you very much, Paul.
You're more than welcome, and thanks you for the invitation. And you know, look, if anyone wants a follow-up discussion, Joe's got my number, Stephen's got my number. So look, anytime, any place, that'd be fine. So I'll leave you to the rest of your meeting, Stephen. And once again, thank you for the invitation to speak to you today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Bye now.
Thanks everyone else, and sure, look, we'll chat again next Monday.
Okay, thanks everybody. Cheers.
Great stuff. Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen. That was brilliant.
Yeah,
Really enjoyed that.
fantastic. Yeah,
Thanks
great
a lot.
one. Cheers now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.